Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Thursday's Special Friday presentation of Dire Literacy. Oh, and that is Friday. Shut up, Tim. That's crazy because now I'm getting the feedback from the share, but I got rid of that. So anyway, tonight our feature is the wonderful Melissa Cundieff, correct? All right, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She's the author of Darling Nova, winner of the Autumn House Press Poetry Prize, and her poems and essays have appeared in such places as The Atlantic and The Best of the Net. She received her MFA from Vanderbilt University. Recently moved away from St. Paul, Minnesota. Melissa taught for a handful of years at Macalester College, as well as the University of Minnesota. She now lives in Massachusetts and lectures in creative nonfiction at Harvard. And with that, I would love to turn it over and hear some of your work. So, Melissa, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm like in summer brain right now, so I have to put on my glasses and do the whole thing. But just thank you so much for having me. And I'll just read a few poems. I'm not gonna do too much banter in between, except to say that I'm reading only new things, and they're kind of sad, but I'm gonna try and end on like a more positive note. But I'm writing a book about my dad who died from Alzheimer's. And so I have a series of poems in this manuscript that are all called Vision, and they're all relatively short, and they are all in the father, the daughter. That's how I am framing our relationship. And then I'm gonna have some other poems kind of in between, but yeah, I'll just go from there. All right, so this first one is called Vision. Sick with Alzheimer's, hallucinating, the father says the boy has fallen. The daughter walks the father to the tree, points her eyes to the ground where the boy is supposed to be, assures the father the grass is empty. The father says the grass is empty. The father says, "Who are you?" The daughter stands close to the father and says, "It's me." The father looks through the daughter, believing her face is another language. The father says the irises are blooming nicely this year. The daughter, relieved by this shard of lucidity, says the irises survived the late frost. The father says the irises are the boy's clothes emptied from the thaw. The daughter says, "Remember me." The father says, "Remember you're not who you think you are." This next one is also called Vision. Sitting on the porch of the house the father doesn't remember is his own. The daughter confides to the father her love for him has become a trapped animal. The father, almost deaf, doesn't hear the daughter. In the daughter's humid periphery, the father becomes a younger version of himself. Hovering near the hinge between real and imaginary, the daughter and her young father exist only as long as the trapdoor's capacity to touch gravity. The father, also imagining, snaps the daughter out of her vision. He says, "I want to go home. Can you please take me home now?" Okay, so these next two have the same title, and the first one is from the daughter's point of view, and then the second one is from the father's point of view. And the language is oftentimes the same, but because of the point of view change, the whole point is that obviously there are language shifts that I did, and I hope they work. I don't know. This is also the first time I've read any of these, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that as well. So the title of these two is Who Are You? Who Am I? The daughter worries the father will turn from himself into someone else as the father drives through the endless state where he was raised. The father and the daughter can only meet in dream now. From the passenger seat, the daughter's eyes snap at grasses. It isn't clear if the father hears when she asks, "Do you know where you're going? Do you know the year?" The daughter awaits the father for answers. On and on the field, a flat audience. Parting the weeds, the daughter repeats, "Do you know who you are? Who am I?" The sky outgrows the windows. The father's steady hands on the wheel, his forward stare, the car's invisible line bisecting the air. And so like, I think that I was trying to attempt to like write from the point of view of like after my dad died, and like I was having a lot of dreams about him. And so this is like from this next one that's from his point of view, is attempting to like come from the beyond, I guess, from some afterworld. So again, who are you? Who am I? I drive through the unending state where I've been placed. My daughter worries I'll turn from myself into someone else. We can only meet in between now. From the passenger seat, our life mute in rapid grasses. It isn't clear if I hear when she asks, "Do you know where you're going? Do you know the year?" She awaits me. Anyone, anyone. On and on the field of flat beat. Parting the weeds, her eyes repeating, "Do you know who you are? Who am I?" The sky outlives the windows. My afterworld hold on the wheel. My forward stare, the car's invisible line, a proof of air. So this is another vision poem. I went home to take apart all my dad's guns because he got very paranoid. And my dad, like I was raised in Texas, my dad was a big gun guy, big military guy. And I was like, I'm not a gun guy. But so I do know how to shoot a gun. I grew up shooting guns, but like it's been a long time. So my mom was like, come home and take apart all these guns because we got to get rid of them because he's, he wants to shoot everyone. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like something I can do. So I learned about it on YouTube. I had to I was just like sitting on YouTube figuring out how to take apart these guns. So vision. Sitting on her childhood bed, the grown daughter aims the Glock towards the desk, a doll's vacant face, the shadow-touched wall. The YouTube video instructs the daughter to point the pistol in a safe direction before unloading. The daughter imagined her father's disbelief if he were to walk in, the misconception of threat like a new country between them. The father downstairs believes his neighbors want to kill him, and so he must kill them first. The man on YouTube tells the daughter to release the magazine, open the slide. Once dismantled, the daughter hides all parts of the pistol throughout the father's house. A high cabinet, the desk's drawer, the bullets inside a vase, inside the room the daughter believes is haunted and will refuse for years to come back to. So after my dad died, I decided to do that like Alzheimer's testing or whatever to see like if I have the gene. And I was fairly positive that I was going to get the gene from my dad, but I also ended up getting it from my mom. And so that's like only 2% of the global population who has that. And so that means that like I'm like 90% more likely to develop Alzheimer's at some point. And I'm actually just like kind of at peace with it. I'm just like living my life. But I obviously like think about it and I'm writing about it for the sake of the book. So this is called Prognosis Dementia. Sweet boy, I say to my son several times a day, a ball, water, and video game. Everything our dog has ever seen glistens in the corner of his allied eye. Outside the window, a shirtless neighbor surveils the lawn's impermanence. I try not to regard his failing body. Consider instead my own living chest, summon my childhood in less than a breath. Sweet boy, I exhale into the ambient. The kitchen hums a note not of this earth. On the table's face, yesterday's list, a half-eaten plate, my numbered days explicit in the genetics of my brain. And I have two more poems, and they're both relatively short. This is the last vision poem. Vision. Is this the beginning or end of the movie? The father asks, in a room white with light. The daughter doesn't herself know the title or year of the film's making. A cowboy rides his horse, and the horizon offers both arrival and exit. The father asks again, what do you think? Sewn shut with myth, the father turns his face from the screen. The daughter watches the cinematic sun summon the cowboy and his horse to an infinite idea of themselves. And this is the last poem I'm going to read. It's called Proof. It's kind of an outlier because it has nothing to do with my father. And I'm actually trying to like pad and fill up the book, and it's like gaps. There's a lot of gaps. And so I'm like, I don't want every poem to be about my dad, but you know, but I also don't want it to like not fit. So I'm working on it to try and make the manuscript cohesive. So this is called Proof. The oracle says she envisions a propeller plane falling to earth, the passenger safely parachuting from the sky like clock hands set free. I say, I envision it too. The moon's addition in daylight, something I can't believe despite often seeing. The oracle says gravity is a god, split into infinite bits seeking reconnection. This makes the circle a circle. Once, I tell her, in New York, a stranger flicked their cigarette at me while I was walking with a boyfriend to a wedding. This would become the last night we'd ever see each other. Along with gravity, I say to the oracle, the god of whom she speaks is also love, whose infinite parts diffuse and fuse again. About the disunion, the breakup with the boyfriend, the oracle continues. Describe what it was like to go missing. Hard to recall, I answer, an invisibility. I remember my children sleeping in their beds, but not at all my own body. Yet here you are, the oracle concludes. Your heavy feet, your heartbeat, and through the window at night, a clear presence of your existence. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, that was awesome. What great work.
Thank you.
Wow. And let's talk a little bit first about the craft of some of these poems. The point of view, you know, the daughter, the father, did that come from you? Did that come initially? Or was that a conscious choice? Or was that something that, you know, you realized that it was, you know, the ball was getting rolling and that's how you were going to write them?
That's a really good question because I'm doing it like very consciously. And I was trying and continue to try to kind of like articulate what it's like to be in conversation with somebody who has Alzheimer's and like when they are actively delusional and hallucinating. And it is very like distancing, right? Like it feels like you are so many like years, like light years away from each other. And so there was something about the impersonality, I think, of like describing us as the father and the daughter that I'm hoping helps achieve that distance, like to articulate what that feels like, you know?
Yeah, I've had similar experiences with my late father, so I really, really relate to this work, and it's really well done. Um, there was a piece that I read called Truce. Is that going to make its way into this manuscript? I know that's more of a narrative nonfiction piece, but it's a wonderful piece.
Thank you. It is. In fact, I'm being sneaky about it. And so what I did, I have 3 right now pieces like that, like those prose pieces. And so I just chopped them up into kind of sections. And so there's like white space on the page. So it's not, you know, like I'll have a paragraph or 2 paragraphs, or maybe sometimes just like 1 line on a page. And so I'm hoping that my editor is fine with that because I feel like they fit into the book if I do it that way. Because I feel like I mean, they are nonfiction and they are prose, but they're also like poetry-esque for sure and hybrid things that I want to include. Um, so as of now, it's definitely in the manuscript, and I hope that's okay with everybody, you know? Yeah. I had fun. I really had fun. I mean, it's like I mean, it's a very sad piece, but like it was thank you for bringing that up because like I think it's one of my favorite things that I've ever written. Um I just felt really had that like writer's high. I was like, man, I'm on drugs, you know, like when I was done with it. It just felt really good to be done with it and I felt good about it.
Yeah, the line about your father introducing himself to you for the first time is so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Thank you. That's what I was going for. It was heartbreaking, you know. So yeah, I'm happy that it's in the manuscript.
So, you know, dealing with your father stuff, a lot of your other poems work on memories and in memory. Why do you think you're so drawn to memories and the memory processes?
Ah, that's such a good question.
Most therapists will charge you $100 an hour for
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I've been obsessed with memory since like long before my father ever became with like the disease of losing his memory. So that was obviously added a whole new layer to, I mean, to say the least, to like my obsession with memory, right? Uh, why was I always so obsessed with it? I don't know, because I'm probably obsessed with mortality to some extent, and I like to revisit the past and think about it. And I also think about how unreliable it is. And I've always wondered if some of my most vivid memories are even real, because like childhood memories and beyond, like are just unreliable. Like they're contained inside of us and us only. And like, who knows? And they shift and they change over time. Also, I think that when I had children, I became kind of distinctly aware of the fact that like I had this kind of ownership over like these very young versions of them before their memories could, because obviously infants and young children don't remember, like we don't remember that part of our lives for the most part. And I remember everything, right? Or I remember a lot about those phases and versions of them and who they were when they were infants and when they were young kids, babies, whatever. And they don't. And like that is a very strange and cool kind of power of, for lack of a better word, like ownership over these like versions of themselves that don't exist and will never exist again. And they don't even have those versions of themselves, and I do. And so I think that like becoming a parent and having that relationship with my kids really like amplified my obsession with memory and my desire to hold on to my memories.
All right, a question from John from the outside. Did you come up with the idea of the book first and write poems for it, or did you write poems on dementia and decide to put them together in a book?
That's a great question. I was completely consumed. My dad was my best friend. And so when he became sick, like I was completely consumed by taking care of him in a good way, and just experiencing this thing alongside him, right? In whatever way I possibly could. And I am still consumed by it. And so there's just no other option. I knew that I was going to be writing about the experience of watching him decline. And now, now that he's been dead now for almost 4 years. And I'm still writing poems sometimes in present tense in which like he's still alive, right? And then I'll write ones from like the present of him still being alive. And then I'm writing poems in the present tense of now, looking back, and obviously taking note of the fact that he's passed. So yeah, no, it's just like it's a book for my dad. And so I knew as soon as I found out that he was sick, that this was gonna happen. There was just like no other way.
So what in the manuscript, what is the youngest version of you that appears with your father?
Um, that's I have a version of myself in which like I am a baby in his lap and he's feeding me with a bottle. And like there's some line that's like, bottle in my mouth, I was like your original reflection or something like that. And I don't even know if that's accurate because maybe it's more like he was my original reflection. I don't know. Like probably more that. And I'm trying to figure out what I like mean. But so like images. But in terms of point of view, I don't have any poems yet, although I would like to tinker around with that, in which like I am kind of trying to investigate either from his point of view, being with me when I was as young as possible, or even from my own point of view when I was young, or like really like very, very childhood young, like little girl.
The brevity in all of your work, your phrasing, and you use some killer lines, but they're all short and they're exact in structures. I mean, the poems kind of read like a snare drum. So does the music is music important to you, and is it important to your writing, important to your life?
Music. So I'm not a musician and I always wish that I was, but it's just not something that like I kind of tried and I don't know. I think it's just about my coordination or something. I was a dancer growing up, and so it probably can't be entirely about my coordination, but when it came time to actually play an instrument, I just always felt like I was failing. And I didn't like the feeling, so I focused on other things. That being said, like people have asked me before, like, why did you become a poet? Which is a really hard and impossible question to answer, but my answer is like Eddie Vedder, like Pearl Jam. Like when I was, and I'm like a little too young to have, like, I never got to see them live in the early 90s, or anything. But, in 1992, I was, 9 years old and I heard Pearl Jam and it just like, it was like this mood. And I was like, I've never felt this mood before. And it just changed my brain. And like I give up a lot to like Pearl Jam. And I know that's silly. But I mean, and their lyrics are often kind of incoherent, right? But it's not really about that. It's about the mood. And so I think my first book is like kind of like more like the language is kind of going all over the place. And sometimes I feel like it is not entirely accessible and it's not doing like the kind of short clipped thing that this manuscript is doing. That's probably just because I was a younger writer when I wrote that book. It's also because like I don't see that kind of approach to language and sound working for poems about Alzheimer's when I'm trying to create an Alzheimer's mood. Like I need things to be crystallized and cut short. There's something about that to me that helps articulate the whole feeling of being alongside somebody who has Alzheimer's. I do use like a lot of internal rhyme. It's often not intentional. And then I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, cool. Like I chose two words that happened to rhyme and I didn't even really know I was doing it. And then sometimes it's not entirely unintentional. Like I'll be like, no, like what's a better word? What's a better word? And then I'm like, maybe I could even think of a word that has a little rhyme in it so I can get some sound stuff going on in the poem. Um, yeah.
So you talked about your work as a younger poet. You got your MFA at Vanderbilt. So what would the person you are today tell the recent MFA graduate about poetry and writing?
That it's going to change. Like your voice is going to change and like be okay with that because I often get down on myself because I feel like I can't even access that part of my brain anymore that used to be so wild with like language. Um, but at the same time, that younger person couldn't access that part of my brain that has gotten better and values the crystallized kind of like economy of things, right? So it goes both ways. Um, and just like to be at peace with that. It's okay that I don't write the same kind of poems that I used to. I still feel like like my goal always is to just kind of like enter into some sort of like trance or and like that can be like via a very like rambling, free associative door, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm doing that less and less. But I still feel like what I'm doing, hopefully anyway, is like a portal into the weird, or kind of like uncharted part of the brain or something or something. So yeah, I just like to be okay with the fact that like, hey, kid, your voice is gonna change. And that's not to say that you don't know how to write poems anymore. It's just that you're writing different poems, you
It's
know.
funny you were talking about dreams, and I read about your interest of dream and dream logic. So Raft, your piece Raft, that reads like a dream. So do you get inspired from having, like, if you have an actual dream, do you write in a dream state? In other words, try to get into that state, or do you wake up from a dream and be like, wow, that could be a poem?
I wish I was cool enough to be like, no, I dream all the time and my dreams are incredible and I write them down and they become poems. I do dream, but they don't really become poems. It's much more like I enter into kind of like a dream even like kind of like a trance state. I know that sounds weird, but like when I'm writing, and so it's more like that. It's not that everything is a conscious choice necessarily, because I definitely am not. I feel sometimes like, like I'm not even in control, like when I sit down to write. Much like one isn't in control when they're dreaming, but I don't take directly from my dreams most of the time. Maybe a few times, but not most of the time.
So would you say your process is like free association and followed by revision?
Yeah. And like constant kind of revision. Like as I'm drafting, I'm constantly erasing and then putting in new things, or new words, whatever. Like the first line that I write is almost never the first line of the poem. It's almost never in the poem at all, not even any bit of the language. It's just like, it's like you have modeling clay, and like it's just constantly pushing and pulling and taking away and adding back. I'm not somebody who has ever been good at, and I do envy people who can do this, who can just like sit down and draft a poem. I'm very dependent on my computer. I do free, like I do handwrite things sometimes, but it's only ever like an image. It's like one little bit of language. I never draft a whole poem with a pen. And so because I'm always like with my computer, I can, like you can always take away and put new stuff in. That's one of the things about having a computer that, and then typing the poem that is just really important to the process for me.
Does that make you look at some of your finished poems and want to revise them, even though they might have appeared in a book?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Like you were talking about Raft, and I'm like, I mean, it's been published, and I look at that piece now, and I mean, it's not that I've made a lot of changes, but anything, I mean, even with my first book, right? Like I'll read it and I'll be like, oh, I wish I could change that. Yeah, all the time.
John says, do you have a technique to write dream logic? And what is it?
Um, do I have a technique to write dream logic, and what is it? Like, how do I get into that mindset? Uh, you just got to get in the zone, man. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that.
Sometimes you're in the zone and sometimes you're just not, right?
Yeah, sometimes you're just not. And when you're not, right? And sometimes you have to like sit down and write despite the fact that you're not in that mindset. I think that like feeling as though I am navigating a dream is an important part of how I need to feel when I'm writing, right? And then I need to somehow, like I have all these dots in my brain and I need to connect them. And it's like that's the work of the poem. Like, how do you connect these dots that are seemingly very, very far away from each other, or are very, very far away from each other? So it's like a dot connecting game for me. And like that's how I dream too, I think. I'm not like a lucid dreamer necessarily, although I have been, and I've like tried to practice it and I got better at it at one point. But like when I wake up from my dreams and I'm trying to make sense of them, I'm like, yeah, like that, this is the path. And it's very circuitous. It went all over the place. And there was a lot of associating that was going on there. But I did figure out a way to like make a tangled kind of thing between all those dots, right? And then like that's what the poem needs to do for me. So I'm like, okay, like this is it. Connect all these dots, you know, whatever they may be.
Last question. Your award-winning chapbook. I actually have two questions. So let's answer them both quickly. It's called Futures with Your Ghost. Do you have firsthand experience in the spirit world, or have you experienced any of the magical of ghosts or hauntings?
Yes, I do, I think. I mean, I'm not a paranormal like expert or anything, nor do I have equipment, although I think that people who do are super cool. Like I love the idea of it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've seen a few, I believe. I'm a believer for sure. And like the idea of just being haunted by anything, anyone living or dead is really important to me. And so like the idea of having a future with one's ghost, to me also kind of like goes back to the idea of like having like being a container for like those first versions of my kids, because like those are like in essence like ghost versions of them, and yet I know that I have like a future with them. And like that's not why that book is called that, but like that's like one kind of example of what I like think about, you know.
Right, last question. You've have a lot of accolades, a lot of awards that you won. Out of you've appeared in major periodicals that most people would only dream about. So out of all of those, what is the one that you have the most pride in?
This is easy. So I got published in, I mean, I feel like this is like, I feel like such an egomaniac.
Oh no, I mean
But,
I fed you this question. You're supposed to
um,
talk about yourself.
I was very surprised when I got published in the Atlantic the first time, because like you just kind of like email an editor and you know whenever that happens it's like, oh, you're probably not ever going to hear back from them, because like there's no, they don't answer unless they're interested or whatever, you know. And so she wrote me back and she was like, hey, would love to publish this poem. And I was like, this is amazing. And then when like the stuff was happening with Roe v. Wade, I wrote this poem about abortion and I just wrote her directly and I was like, look, I wrote this like in an hour and I never do that. It usually takes me 2 weeks to actually finish a poem, but like I'm very happy with this. And like it's about time, right? Like I want this published and I want it published in the best possible place that I can find because it's like very important to me politically. And she was like, yeah, send it my way. And then like 15 minutes later, she was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Oh
You know, because
wow.
like it was political and I'm not really a political poet at all. And but I felt really strongly about this one. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing that this gets to go into this incredible place, you know? So
Great story and great piece. So here's the last book, Darling Nova, and definitely check out an upcoming book that Melissa read from the new stuff from tonight. And Melissa, thank you so much for coming on in and reading such great work and a wonderful chat.
yeah, thank you so much. This has been very, very fun. Thank you.
All right. And so folks that are watching on any of the streams, thank you for watching. I'm going to now shut the stream off because I'm a bitch. But if you'd like to read, if you'd like to read from the open mic, it's true. If you'd like to read from the open mic, just use the Zoom link. I'll be happy to let you in. The open mic is coming up in a minute or so. So thanks once again.
Thank you.